Is there danger? Justice shall be done. Certainly, I stand for the light. A sound plan. Is there danger? I stand for the light. For honor. Certainly, justice shall be done. A sound plan. Of course. Certainly. You are past command. For honor. Justice is come. A sound plan. For honor. Of course. A sound plan. Foul name. Justice shall be done. For honor. Betrayer of the light. Feel my wrath. Betrayer of the light. Feel my wrath. A sound plan. Light and strength. For honor. A sound plan. Justice has come. Justice shall be done. The light is my strength. Of course, a sound plan. I'm here to help. Certainly. For honor. Of course. Certainly. For honor. Certainly. A sound plan. Of course. Foul name. For honor. The light is my strength. Of course. Certainly. Justice is come. A sound plan. Of course. Certainly. A sound plan. Of course. For honor. Of course. For honor. Of course. Foul knave. A sound plan. First blood. I stand for the light. Justice. A sound plan. Of course. A sound plan. Justice shall be done. You are past redemption. Stand for the light. For honor. Certainly. Betrayer of the light. Justice shall be done. For honor. Certainly. Stand for the light. For honor. A sound
is under attack.
For honor. Certainly. Is there danger? Of course. For honor. Of course. For honor. Of course. For honor. Of course. For honor. Certainly. Of course. A sound plan. Of course. For honor. Of course. For honor. A sound plan. I'm here to help. Of course. A sound plan. For honor. A sound plan. For honor. Is there danger? What ails you?
I am ready.
Hello.
I'm here to help. Of course. Certainly.
Our brethren's
A
town
sound
is under
plan.
attack.
Certainly. A sound plan. Of course. A sound plan. For honor. Of course. Feel my wrath. Is there danger? For honor. Of course. I stand for the light. Certainly. For honor. For my father and king. Certainly. For honor. You are past revenge. Of course. Certainly. Of course.
Greetings, my lord.
For honor. I'm here to help. Give me something to do! Light is my strength. Of course. This town is under attack. Certainly. For honor. Certainly. For honor. A sound plan. Certainly. Is there danger? Of course. I'm here to help. Killing spree. For honor. Of course. Certainly. A sound plan. For honor. A sound plan. The light is my strength. For honor. Of course. For honor. A sound plan. For honor. Certainly. A sound plan. Certainly. Is there danger? A sound plan. For honor. I stand for the light. Is there danger? Certainly. Justice shall be done. Is there danger? Our brethren's town is under attack. I'm here to help. Light is my strength. Of course. A sound plan. For honor. Of course. I stand for the light. A sound plan. The light is my strength. For honor. A sound plan. For honor. Stand for the light. A sound plan. Justice shall be done. Of course. Certainly. Justice has come. A sound plan. For honor. A sound plan. Certainly. A sound plan. Of course. For honor. A sound plan. For honor. A sound plan. For Lord Orion. Justice shall be done. Our brethren's town is under attack. I stand for the light. For honor. A sound plan. For honor. Certainly. For honor. Of course. For honor. Of course. Certainly. For honor. Certainly. Of course. For honor. Certainly. A sound plan. Of course. Of course. A sound plan.
Kill dominating. Double kill.
Is there danger? A sound plan. Certainly. Justice shall be done. A sound plan. Certainly. A sound plan. For honor. Certainly. Town is under attack. A sound plan. Certainly. A sound plan. For honor. Of course. For honor. A sound plan. For honor. Of course. Certainly. Of course. Certainly. For honor. Certainly. Of course. Certainly. For honor. For Lord Oran.
Our reverend town is under attack.
For honor. Certainly. For honor. A sound plan. Of course. For honor. Of course. For honor. Of course. A sound plan. Of course. A sound plan.
Double kill.
Certainly. Of course. A sound plan. I stand for the light. For honor. Light is my strength. A sound plan. Of course. Danger. For honor. Certainly. A sound plan. Certainly. For honor.
Mega kill. Unstoppable. Double kill.
Certainly.
Town is under attack.
Of course. Certainly. My light for justice shall be done. Of course. Is there danger? A sound plan. Certainly. Of course. A sound plan. Of
Our
course.
brethren's town is under attack.
Here to help. For honor. Of course. For honor. A sound plan. For honor. Of course. A sound plan. For honor. Of course. A sound plan. Certainly. A sound plan. Of course. Certainly.
Wait till you see me in action.
Is my
Our
strength.
brethren's town is
A
under
sound
attack.
plan. Of course. Certainly. This shall be done. A sound plan. Of course. Certainly. Of course. Certainly. A sound plan. For honor.
Our brethren's town is under attack.
I'm here to help. For honor. A sound plan. Of course. Justice shall be.
Our
There's no
brethren's
time
town
for
is under attack.
Strength. For honor. Of course. For honor. A sound plan. For honor. A sound plan. Certainly. Of course. For honor.
Town is under attack.
Of course. You are past again. I'm here to help. A sound plan. My strength. Certainly. A sound plan. Certainly. A sound plan.
Town is under attack.
Of course. Certainly. Of course. Stand for the light. Justice shall be done. Certainly. I stand for the light. I'm here to help. Of course. Certainly. For my father. A sound plan. Of course. Is there danger?
Which way?
Justice shall be done. A sound plan.
Wicked sick.
Certainly.
Monster kill. Triple kill.
Of course. A sound plan. Of course. Certainly. You are past redemption. For honor. Of course. A sound plan. Of course. For honor. Foul knave. Certainly.
Our brethren's town is under attack.
For honor.
Betrayal.
Of course. For Lord Oran. Justice has come. A sound plan. Foul knave. Of course. A sound Certainly. Of course. A sound plan. Certainly. A sound plan. Justice shall be done. Of course. A
Our
sound
brethren's
plan.
town is under attack.
For honor. Certainly. Of course. Certainly. Of course. A sound plan. Oh my. Certainly. Of course. A sound
The town is under attack.
Of course. For my father, the king. Foul name. For honor. Certainly. For honor. Of course. For honor. Certainly. A sound plan. For honor. Certainly. A sound plan. Certainly. A sound plan. Of course. Certainly. Of course. Certainly. Of course. Certainly. For honor. Of course. A sound plan. For honor. Is there danger? Of course. For honor. A sound plan. Of course. For honor. Of course. Certainly. A sound plan. Certainly. For honor. Of course. For honor. A sound plan. For honor. A sound plan. For honor. Certainly.
Triple kill!
Certainly. The light is my strength. A sound plan. Certainly. Of course. Certainly. I stand for the light. A sound plan. Of course. Certainly. Here to help. For honor. Of course. For honor. Of course. Feel my I stand for the light. For honor. Of course. Certainly. Of course. For honor. A sound. Father the King. For
Killing spree.
a sound. For honor. A sound. Of course. I stand for the light. For honor. A sound plan. For honor. The light is my strength. Certainly. Of course. A sound plan. For honor. Certainly. A sound plan. Certainly. A sound plan. Certainly. A sound plan. Certainly. For honor. Of course. For honor. Of course. Justice has come. A sound plan. I'm here to help. Of course. A sound plan. Of course. A sound plan. Certainly. A sound plan. Certainly. A sound plan. Of course. Justice shall be done. Certainly. Of course. Certainly. A sound plan. Of course.
Double kill!
The light is my strength. Certainly. For honor. Of course. For honor. A sound plan. For honor. Of course. For honor. Certainly. A sound plan. For honor. Of course. Certainly. For honor. Of course. Justice shall be done. For honor. A sound plan. For honor. Certainly. Of course. Is there danger? A sound plan. Certainly. Of course. Certainly. Of course. For honor. A sound plan. For honor. A sound plan. For honor. A sound plan.
Betrayer of light.
For honor. Justice shall be done. A sound plan. Of course. A sound plan. Sound plan. For honor. Certainly.
Mega kill.
Here to help. The light is my strength. Certainly. Sound plan. Certainly. For honor. A sound plan. For honor. Of course. Certainly. Of course. A sound plan.
Our brethren's town is under attack.
A sound plan. Of course. I stand for the light.
Unstoppable.
Of course. For honor. Certainly. For honor. Certainly.
Wicked sick.
I'm here to help.
Our brethren's town is under attack.
Certainly. A sound plan. I stand. To help. This shall be done. I'm here to help. Certainly. Of course. You are past the death. A sound plan. Is there danger? Certainly.
Our brethren's town is under attack.
For honor. A sound plan. For honor. I'm here to help. Justice shall be done. Certainly. For honor. Certainly. A sound
Our
plan.
brethren's town is under attack.
The light is my strength. I stand for the light. The light is my strength. I stand for the light. For honor. Certainly. For honor. Certainly. The light is my strength.
Our veteran's town is under attack.
Of course. Certainly. Of course. A sound plan. For honor. Certainly. Of course. Certainly. For honor. A sound
Our
plan.
veteran's town is under
Of
attack.
course. Certainly. Of course. Certainly. A sound plan. A sound plan. Of
Town
course.
is under attack.
Certainly. A sound plan. Certainly. A sound plan. Certainly. Of course. For honor. A sound plan.
Killing spree.
Of course. Feel my wrath. For my father the king. Feel my wrath. For my father the king. For honor. For Lord Oran. Of course.
Double kill.
Our veteran's town is under attack.
Certainly. The light is my strength. I stand for the light. For honor. I'm here to help. Of course. For honor. Of course. A sound plan. Justice shall be done. For honor. Of course.
Our veteran's town is under attack.
For honor. Of course. For honor. Of course. A sound plan. Of course. For honor. Of course. For honor. A sound plan.
Our veteran's town is under attack.
For honor. Of course. A sound plan. Of course. A sound plan. For honor. Of course. Certainly. For honor. Of course. A sound plan. For honor. Certainly. For honor. Of course. Certainly. For honor. Of course. For honor. A sound plan. For honor. Betrayer of light. For honor. For Lord